Bluegrass Jamalong is proud to be sponsored by Collins Guitars and Mandolins, each and every one built from the sound up in Austin, Texas. This episode is also brought to you by Peghead Nation, the home of roots music instruction. If you want to improve your playing, join me and thousands of other pickers getting better every day at pegheadnation.com. Hi, this is Matt, and you're listening to Bluegrass Jamalong, the podcast for anyone and everyone who loves bluegrass. Hey everybody, welcome back to Bluegrass Jamalong. This week I have another interview for you, and it was recorded at IBMA a couple of weeks ago, as you will be able to tell when you listen to it, because there's a bit of noise in the background. It's really cool carrying out interviews at the event. I don't often get to talk to people face to face, they're often done by video call, and it's just something about the buzz and the excitement of being at IBMA that is fun. And my guests this week were very much part of IBMA. It's Kristina Gaddy and Lillian Werbin from the Banjo Gathering, and they curated a strand of IBMA called Roots Revival, a Black Stringband Symposium. And that's what I wanted to chat to them about. Obviously, Kristina's been on the podcast before, talking about her wonderful book, Well of Souls, and a lot of you will be familiar with Lillian from Elderly Instruments and all sorts of other places. But I particularly wanted to talk to them about Roots Revival while it was all kind of still new and happening, and to find out how it started, how it came about, what the idea behind it was, what are some of the important conversations that have come out of it and need to be continued, what the response to it has been like, all sorts of things. And it was great to get to do that at the festival itself. Due to timings, I started off chatting to Kristina, and Lillian joined us partway through because she'd been delayed by something beforehand, so you'll sort of hear her join us halfway through. But I hope you enjoy this. I will stick links in the show notes to the Banjo Gathering website, because Banjo Gathering is happening pretty soon, October the 24th to 27th in Lansing, Michigan, but also because there's information there that is relevant to all of this and how you can help fund something like this happening in the future so it doesn't become a one-off and these kind of conversations are continued and built upon and deepened and become part of the fabric of how we talk about this music, because I think that would be amazing. But that is it. Without further ado, I will leave you to listen to my interview with Kristina Gaddy and Lillian Werbin, chatting about Roots Revival, a Black Stringband Symposium at IBMA. I am here at IBMA 2024 with Kristina Gaddy, and if you've listened to my podcast for any amount of time, you will know Kristina from a fabulous book, Well of Souls, all about the history of the banjo. But she is here this year also curating a strand of IBMA called Roots Revival, along with Lillian Werbin from Elderly Instruments, and they are both from the Banjo Gathering. And so I'd love to chat about that, because it's there's so much kind of past and present and future within this conversation, and I'd love to know, just from a starting point, kind of how this particular strand came about.
So Anna Klein of IBMA reached out to Lily after last year's event and said, basically that it was important for them to include conversations about, kind of histories of, in general, people of color in bluegrass, since it's, very much a majority white music scene, but very specifically, Black contributions to bluegrass. And again, not just looking at the history, but looking at the present and the future. What is that? What are the musicians that have come before? Who's in the scene right now? And then what does that look like? How do we, continue to have conversations maybe that people don't want to be having, or think about, what does actual diversity and inclusion in a space like IBMA look like? And so Anna asked Lily to do that, and Lily has, I joked in our panel that she has the longest little ribbons on her name tag here at IBMA, because you get a little ribbon if you're a sponsor and if you're on, this board or you're a speaker. And so she has like 12 of those, which shows how involved she is. But that also meant that there's no way that she was going to be able to do this herself. And so she and I co-plan an event that's called the Banjo Gathering. It's been around for 27 years and was founded by two of our older banjo collector friends who wanted to get a group of people together, very informally, just to talk about banjo history, to talk about, where this instrument came from, and sometimes on a really granular level. And that event is like the first time that Daniel Jata from the Gambia came and talked about, the similarities of clawhammer banjo playing to the style that he plays on the akanting. A lot of banjo roots research came out of Banjo Gathering. So it's a small event, but it's a really important event in terms of banjo knowledge and history, and therefore kind of this music in general. And so about 5 years ago, Lily and I started helping with the planning, and then this year is the first year that she and I are doing it completely alone. Our founders of it kind of wanted to retire and let it go. But it's been exciting because it, in a way, has allowed us to do something like Roots Revival here at IBMA, where Lily and I kind of have the freedom to say, this isn't, it wasn't 6 panels about the banjo at IBMA. It was really about these, Black histories and futures in roots music. But, through the kind of structure that we have with Banjo Gathering, we were able to put this on, reach out to the artists, put together what our ideas for the panels, what we thought would be cool, and make it happen.
And that's really cool because, I've heard you say before that the banjo is an excellent kind of frame to look at American history through, and it's a brilliant device for telling those stories. But it would be very simple to kind of box these conversations off as being just about the banjo or just about the historical influence of black music and black musicians. And it's a continuous, much broader thing than that, isn't it? So it's great to have that opened out, because it could very easily be partitioned off as a conversation about the past.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. So it's definitely not just about the instrument or the music. Our first panel was called Navigating Narratives, and so we had Brandy Waller-Pace, who is an founder of the Fort Worth African American Music Festival. We had Kaya Cater, who's a musician. We had Lillian Werbin, who is, a music retailer and really involved in the industry, and Maya Brown Boateng, who's a banjo scholar, ethnomusicologist. And so they're all, Black women in the music industry, and they were talking about kind of just the different facets of their experience and, what they see as challenges, what they see as opportunities, where they find joy in their work, even with the struggles that they come across. We had a panel on instrument building with Black instrument makers. We talked about kind of the role of the archive in uncovering and respecting Black musicians who came before, but how do we treat those as contemporary musicians today? How should we be dealing with those source recordings? So we got to be pretty broad with what we wanted to talk about, and that was really exciting and lovely, and just great to bring a community of people together who, we have a virtual community that's strong, and sometimes certain groups of people are able to get together and kind of talk about these things. But this was really an opportunity to, I would have invited 20 more people if we'd had the budget to do it, but even as many as we had, to really just bring people together and let them spend time together to see what they come up with. Jake Blunt, who's a fantastic musician but also a PhD, candidate, Maya, who's a PhD candidate, and then Joe Johnson, who's a great banjo player, but also a PhD candidate. I heard them talking like, oh, maybe we should work on an edited volume, of something, related to our work. And that just warmed my little historian heart of, okay, yeah, if this is the place where the three of you, can be together and start like brainstorming, oh, what's the, if we were going to put together a book, like what would it be? And even just plant those little seeds or plant seeds of bands, maybe, or some of the younger musicians that we brought in, can they make connections in the industry here that could help them, boost their future?
And it was really interesting just hearing some of those different perspectives about, because it's very easy for a non-black person like me to presume there is a black string band story, and of course there isn't. There are as many as there are musicians and as many as there are people, and it's very important to hear individual stories, not just be confronted with the sense of this is the story, and right. To hear different people's experiences, and to hear Trey Wellington talk about the expectations he feels of what he's supposed to be as a black musician, that like is entirely not about who he is as a human, and it's just, they were fascinating things to hear.
Yeah, I thought Trey was, really kind of raw in that moment on the Black Music in Appalachia kind of discussion showcase, having a really visceral experience of, did I get booked for this venue, for this festival, because I'm black? Or did I get booked because I'm a really talented musician who makes really compelling bluegrass music? And the fact that he has to ask himself that, is sad, right? Every musician should always just feel, any creative should always feel, I got into this art show, I got into this, music venue, I got this piece published, whatever. I did that on the merit of my work and not because somebody was saying, oh, we need a black artist on our lineup, we need a black, artist in our gallery, and really considering that this is, the merit of their work. And so to, hear those stories kind of from everybody, I think it opened a lot of eyes, and we even had, people come up who were in the audience and say, I'd never thought about that, I'd never heard that, wow, that's, really awful. So it's that, again, of course, we're always afraid that we're preaching to the converted, and that these are people who already, kind of have a similar perspective as we do. But even if that's who was in the room, they were still learning things and still coming with, really heartfelt reactions to what they were hearing and experiencing. So,
and maybe sometimes when you preach to the converted, you convert them into preachers, and that kind of
yes, I love that idea. That's what I want. I want more preachers, because that's, and that was the other kind of, I think that's a constant conversation in this, which is, to put the labor on black folks to educate white folks, like that's just more labor, and if there's white folks in this industry who learn something and then can kind of come back and say to their room full of white people who are planning an event, oh, to check them, right? To have somebody like me be like, is that an appropriate thing to do? Is it not an appropriate thing to do? If we're, going to be talking about, diversity, equity, and inclusion, are we actually doing that, or are we kind of just talking randomly? So.
And we're now joined by Lillian Werbin from LD Instruments and the Banjo Gathering. Lillian, it's lovely to have you here. So the question I'm really interested to ask, you're very embedded in the whole world of IBMA and have been for a very long time. And I'm curious as to whether over those years you've seen a willingness to talk about this, or if this is still a conversation that is has to be pushed very hard.
I think there's a willingness, but it might be passive. I think you need to be pretty intentional about some of these conversations, and about including demographics that might not be considered the typical demographic. And so I think there's been a lot of movement. However, there's plenty of room to grow, and I think there's plenty of room for them to be better supporters and more significant supporters, and maybe take some of the brunt off of our backs in having that conversation. So.
Well, yeah, and I think that's really interesting about the weight of that, because I saw a post the other day from Rhiannon Giddens saying this is happening and I'm not a part of it, and that's fantastic. Yeah. She doesn't feel like she has to be having that conversation all the time.
I mean, it is a taxing thing to bring the conversation to the table and to always be the one to have to execute and be patient and kind and welcoming people into your mindset and your perspective rather than being combative. It's more taxing to do it pleasantly, but it's more effective. And so there's definitely a higher tax on Black women in particular, but what the Banjo Gathering is taxed with is continuing to keep the conversation relevant. And so I'm very grateful for the opportunity we were given here at IBMA this year, and I'm hopeful that they'll continue to support and make it less of an opportunity and more of a standard.
I just wanted to also add, I think there's a really interesting thing that in terms of that openness and that shift, there's also a little bit of a cultural thing happening about is this IBMA or is this Bluegrass? And IBMA wants to be very welcoming and welcome in, kind of other forms of roots music, old time musicians and that. But I come back to this really great quote that Jake Blunt gave me, which was, if you're going to welcome Black people in, you have to be open to the sound shifting.
Yes.
A Black person's musical influences in their upbringing, in what they bring to the music, is not the same as a lot of white folks. And so, we were standing listening to New Dangerfield play on the street festival. And there was a couple in front of us, and, the wife was... They drank a little bit, but the wife was having a good time and kind of bopping along and dancing. And, they're not a bluegrass band. They're not an old-time band. They are their own, they're their own thing that kind of crosses these genres based on who they are as musicians. And the husband or the man that she was with said, "Oh, is this even bluegrass?" And it killed her vibe. And then all of a sudden she was not having a good time anymore.
Yeah. Well, it's the parameters that get placed on enjoying music and being involved in the music. Bluegrass has been very particular about excluding people up until very, very recently. And so forgive us if we don't trust the welcoming vibe just yet. It has to be sustainable. It has to last, or it's not real.
And I think it's a little bit, how with bluegrass you're constantly oh, that's new grass, oh, that's Jew grass, oh, that's, this grass, that grass, and it's it's almost like they come up with those words because bluegrass still means this really narrow thing. And again, if you want to be welcoming, the narrow definitions are not good for welcoming people in. So that's I think that's just part of that shift that, hopefully keeps happening.
You have to be willing to let your wall down in terms of this is my descriptor. Yeah. This is how I identify with this music, and that doesn't need to shift. It's the parameters you're placing on other people that needs to shift.
And that's, why one of our panels very intentionally was called Beyond Bluegrass, because yes, we can celebrate, Black string band, Black musicians' contributions to very specifically the bluegrass genre. Arnold Schultz, Leslie Riddle, we can do that. But we also have to be so Darcy Ford was here, and she's the co-founder of something called Stockton Soul, put on a Motown record, put on a Stax record.
Yeah.
Guess what? You're going to have black string band musicians in the background being, in the case of Stax, like directed by Isaac Hayes, a Grammy. I think he's official, like maybe he got, like, I don't know. Anyway, so many awards, like well known,
right. Decorated.
Yeah, decorated, and that's something that's like that. I'd be hard pressed for a lot of traditional, musicians to even know that or even think about that. And so it's that thing of like.
We'll be right back with you just after this. Introducing the all-new Hill Country series from Collings Guitars. Although strongly bluegrass inspired, these new Dreadnought and OM models are highly versatile and represent a significant tonal expansion to the Collings flat-top lineup. Featuring matching hand-pulled appointments and individual tonewood selection and voicing, the Hill Country guitars deliver a warm, woody and deeply fundamental voice not previously heard from their acoustic instruments. Check out Collings' YouTube and social media channels for demos by world-class bluegrass pickers Jake Workman, Bob Minner and Kenny Smith. You can also get hands-on with the new Hill Country series at the Collings Guitars and Morgan Music IBMA booth in Raleigh, North Carolina from September 27th and 28th. You can learn more at collingsguitars.com. This episode is also brought to you by Peghead Nation, the home of roots music instruction. With 65 streaming video courses for guitar, mandolin, banjo, fiddle, dobro, bass and ukulele from some of the leading names in acoustic music, Peghead Nation has something for every picker. You'll learn the tunes and techniques you need to join in at jams and play the music you love, plus advanced techniques like improvisation, theory and ear training. Your first course is just $20 per month, and you can add more for $10 a month. Sign up for any course and get your first month free with the promo code JAMALONG, all one word. Join thousands of other players, including me, who are advancing on their instruments and having more fun playing the roots music they love at pegheadnation.com.
What does it mean to have Darcy, who is a classical violinist, who loves like soul music orchestras and Motown orchestras, playing old time and being a Black Banjo and Fiddle Fellowship recipient, and like learning tunes from Earl White, and she talked really beautifully about kind of how she's approached some tunes. Like, I don't have to learn it exactly like this recording. I can go find this melody that I like and this kind of these lyrics that I like and mix them together and kind of almost invent a tradition that I know has been lost, right? What would it sound like if Joe and Odell Thompson had been able to, mentor somebody when they were in their 20s and 30s instead of, at the end of their life.
I think that's why we named it Roots Revival, as opposed to just a Black Stringband Symposium, is that sense of going back and getting it, Sankofa, and like reinvigorating the music with what is current and fresh in the sense of like it's personal and it's unique.
Yeah, and we were talking before you joined us about that idea. It could be a very easy conversation to talk about it as a history thing and an archive thing, and this influenced where we are now. But that sense of, and somebody mentioned this to me before, the phrase of like not bringing diversity to bluegrass, bringing diversity back to bluegrass. Like it's not a, do you know what I mean?
Bluegrass historically has not celebrated diversity, so I mean it's an
uphill battle.
Yeah, I don't like to use phrases that like might erase history as it stands, but I like the idea of those groups of individuals who have helped create bluegrass being welcomed back into the current scene and being celebrated for their contributions in it rather than pigeonholed into a corner around it.
Well, I know all of what both of you just talked about, like if you wander around a week of all this, less than half of the music you're going to hear in any form is bluegrass. Like last night, the Red Hat Amphitheatre, Sierra Farrell and Sam Bush. Neither of those is a bluegrass set. But nobody quite, and this is what
I didn't say it.
This is what I love about it, though, is like my podcast is a bluegrass podcast. I'm doing air quotes you can't see on a podcast, but like, you know, nowhere near half of what I talk about is actually bluegrass as you would define it, and that's the joy, right? It's this music and all the stuff it's spawned and all the stuff that goes back and stands on the shoulders, and that's the point of it. It's a living, breathing thing, and that's what makes it great.
It's a continuation.
It's and that's the thing with a tradition.
Yeah.
Is it nothing is preserved in amber, right? Language is not, foodways are not, music is not, culture is not. We're always adapting and changing, and that's part of the way that humans work, and we have to have that for music too, of being, you know, and you know, I don't want to be throwing bluegrass under the bus either. You know, I was at Clifftop, which is a quote unquote old time festival, and you know, somebody wanted to come play tuba, you know, in a jam, and people got upset. And it's like, you know what? A tuba's a bass line. And even if you have these kind of romantic notions of like, oh, people up in the holler playing music. I mean, you know, don't you hear these old recordings. Somebody's playing a piano. Somebody's playing a clarinet. They were playing the instruments that they had and that they liked and that they spoke to them.
Right.
And so to just say, oh, you know, if you're not playing fiddle, banjo, dobro, guitar, bass, you're not playing bluegrass.
Don't forget that mandolin.
Oh, sorry. Whoops.
Whoops. I have a friend who we completed Leadership Bluegrass this year together, and she plays the accordion. And she has a hard time getting into some of the bluegrass jams around here, and it's unfair because she loves the music just as much as anyone else who is here enjoying the biggest week in bluegrass. You know, it's the kind of thing where the fans are holding back the genre more than the artists and the businesses and like those of us who are like quote unquote leading the bluegrass industry. It's about the fans and if they're willing to adapt with us or not. You know, like we didn't coin all of those terms. You know, like newgrass is not something that the business is coined to try and sell something. That's something that the fans came up with, or not fans. You know, like people who are either trying to protect traditional bluegrass, or those who have opened their minds to other types of the same genre. It's all a dialogue. We're willing to have it.
But you don't want to be the ones knocking on the door asking to have the conversation all the time.
It's a lot more palatable for us if you come to me and ask to have a conversation rather than me telling you you're supposed to have one.
Yeah. And then I'll add to that, which is in terms of it being a bigger conversation, if we're going to invite other people, you know, there's been some talks about money, right, and people's labor, and you know, you want to bring people in to have these conversations to serve as education, you have to compensate them. Yeah. You have to be able to say, you sharing your knowledge and expertise is just as valuable as sharing your music. So if somebody's getting paid to share their music and they're teaching a workshop, doing a panel, like they need to be paid for that too as labor.
We were talking just before about the thing that Trey Wellington was sharing about that idea of just worrying that he's being booked for things because he's a black musician. Aside from that every person who's creative in the world has a level of personal stress about their thing. Yeah. And everybody has that, and we can't remove that, but we can hopefully in time remove the other stress of wondering if you're asked there in the first place because of a characteristic you have rather than who you are as an individual.
I always think about this in that, like, how do you, the audience, identify? I'll give you a second to think about, like, am I an artist? Am I a hard worker? Am I patient? Am I kind? All of these things, descriptors, whatever descriptor you want, choose that. I don't have a choice. When I walk in the room, the first thing people notice is I'm black. And so not being able to choose how I'm received is in itself a difficulty. And there has to be acknowledgement in that fact. Because when we're showing up in these spaces, it is significantly more taxing to be in the room, to have the conversation, to field the questions than it is for someone who might be a different person of color or a white man, especially in this industry. Like, our voices have been actively erased, and you have to be intentional in understanding that, and then like counteracting how those voices get used. I don't know if that makes sense.
Totally.
But.
Yeah, and so the hope is that this is just the start of a conversation that continues at every IBMA and every place people gather to talk about until the point there isn't a conversation to be had.
Well, and that's kind of the thing, is that like the conversation should always continue. It's the idea that, like culture, it's ever changing and ever adapting and ever adding on. And so the conversation and learning,
One of the things that Brandy Waller-Pace brought up for Fort Worth African American Roots Music Festival and Decolonizing the Music Room, which is her nonprofit, is, the idea of like, well, okay, so if we're talking about funding, if we're talking about money, where's it coming from? And then there are these grants that are for, people, the inclusion for people of color. And she just said, like, I want to point out that that's not Black.
Yep.
Those two terms are not synonymous. And, the Arnold Schultz Fund of the IBMA Foundation says people of color, even though Arnold Schultz was a Black man. And it's not to say that we don't need lots of diversity, like, everywhere in the roots music world, and it is predominantly white, and like we could have more people of Latino origin and like inclusion of those kind of traditional musics and what people from all over the world, everything. But that's different because, as other participants said, it's like they can walk into a room that's a reception for people of color and still be the only Black person there. And so,
naming it is important.
And sometimes it's just that acknowledgement of, maybe we can't change what the Arnold Schultz Fund language
is. Yes, we can. I'm on the committee.
But
we'll be talking about it.
Yeah, or saying this is the diversity fund and it's for people of color and it's this much, and then this is very specifically the Arnold Schultz Fund and it's for Black inclusion in Bluegrass or whatever it is. But to be the first thing is to have that realization and that acknowledgement, right? And I do think that is one of the things, like that is the light bulb that went off in some people's heads.
Yes. So in particular, I won't name him, but he was chair of IBMA Foundation board for quite some time. And what he came up and talked to me about was our use of people of color in the Arnold Schultz Fund and not using Black to explain what the fund is trying to support. And what I know as a current committee member is it's going to take effort and time to get my other committee members to understand where I'm coming from. And it better comes from him than me.
But that's the thing. It's
not lost on me that I often have, and I'm lucky in a lot of ways, and it's also a curse in a lot of ways, to have white allies who are close to me, who I trust and love, who can say some of these things, and it's better heard because it's not coming from a Black woman's mouth. And I've said things that my white colleagues will say that will then get heard, and that's part of the problem, is trusting the Black experience as we are explaining it, which is taxing enough to explain. but it's even harder to explain it and have it questioned, and have it explain it again and then have it questioned. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. But that's people have been asking us, well, what's next? Like, are we doing this again at IBMA next year? And the honest truth is we have no idea. We don't know what the future of this looks like.
Find us funding.
Yeah.
Help us put this on again. That's really what it comes down to, is we need a generous donor, or we need a lot of really supportive small donors to put this together.
And I do want to come back to that, which is we paid all of our participants.
Yes.
It was very modest, but we did pay them. We did an equity model for travel. So basically how far people were coming was equated with their travel funding that we were able to provide. And then we had 2 Airbnbs for people to stay in, because we people from
IBMA is an expensive endeavor.
Yeah. So
as
we had
someone
people
who comes every year, it is not easy to bring people to this event who are not already scheduled and wanting to come to this event. And because this event is not historically Black friendly,
it's expensive.
It's expensive.
And we did not want people to incur expenses to come and, do this for us, basically. And so that's like one of the questions. But even the fact that people are asking us to do it again, or what is the future of it, I think that that's a really good sign that people, that they want to keep having the conversations. And, to be honest, there's a lot of people who are like, oh, I'm so sorry I wasn't able to make, to the rooms.
I'll be writing a strongly worded letter.
But, there is so much going on at IBMA. And so how do we make sure that if we do this, the people who want to be there can come, and we it's not just again, yes, preaching to the choir, we make the preachers. I love that. But also, how does it radiate out from there? And that's what we'll be thinking about.
Yeah, really.
Over the next couple of months.
Well, and
after we finish
regular banjo gathering.
Well, I remember talking to you about Well of Souls, and kind of one of the things I remember you saying was, what I really hope when people say what's next, what I really hope is that somebody else picks this up and adds to it, and that it's kind of...
And I'm getting goosebumps right now as I'm talking about it. I am it's just so grateful that, I got together 3 Black ethnomusicologists who are studying banjo and Black music traditions in the same the same room, because what I want to do is, if somebody, and this happened recently, somebody reached out to me about an opportunity of somebody was wanted somebody to teach kind of a Black music history class, and I'm like, cool, I don't that doesn't need to be me. You want to talk about this aspect, reach out to Maya. You want to talk about this, reach out to Jake. You want to talk about this, reach out to Joe. You want to talk about this, reach out to Brandy. And to be able to say, these passing it on, right? Giving those opportunities to the people who are doing the work right now. And, again, we're really glad to be putting this on, but it's also, if anybody was in the room who was listening to this, they saw me running the Zoom, getting people and going out, and it kind of was a 2-woman show,
announcing everything.
Yeah, and I just love for it to be bigger. But then I also want to just add, I don't know, maybe this is maybe fine. Final comment is that I'm really excited. Today is Saturday.
Yeah.
September 28th. Right now, as we speak, the Black Americana Fest is happening in New Orleans.
Yes.
And none of the people who were here for Roots Revival at IBMA are at the Black Americana Music Festival. So we can have 2 Black things happening at the same time. And that's they had a panel there about kind of histories of Black music. Yeah, and I was just really excited because I was like, this is awesome. We have this
we have.
I don't want to call it an army because people might think I'm trying to be militant, but we're gathering.
But we have a gathering.
Yeah,
we have a gathering
and momentum building, and that's awesome, right? That's really.
We have a shared commitment to supporting each other and each other's work, and making sure that it does not get lost in the bungles of history, like so many amazing Black musicians, historians, just in general, the Black contributions have gotten lost over time, and what we're doing hopefully means that we're preserving some voices and amplifying some voices and continuing on more legacy.
Yeah.
Cool. I hope you enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that conversation. I found it really thought-provoking. It made me think about some things in a way that I hadn't before. It sort of opened my eyes, made me consider some stuff, and it was just great to chat to them both. Link in the show notes to the Banjo Gathering website, as I said at the start, where you can go and check out some more information, find out about the Banjo Gathering, which is about to happen. That is it. I will see you next time. Have a great week, and happy picking.
Bluegrass Jam-Along is proud to be sponsored by Collings Guitars and Mandolins, making some of the finest guitars and mandolins in the world since the 1970s. Visit collingsguitars.com and find out why.